This video is brought to you by SideNotes. Hey, we have a lot of things to talk about today, and even though I want to chat with you more, we don't have time for that, so use the chapters below if you want to jump around the video and the different segments. Let's just dig in. Starting off with the basic macOS settings. I'm going to first replace the default wallpaper with one of mine. Before I do anything else though, I check to see if there's a software update. As expected, there was, and after 20 minutes I moved on to the next step. By the way, while checking for updates, be sure to turn on automatic updates. One of the many reasons to wear an Apple Watch is to be able to unlock my Mac with it. To enable that feature, I go to Settings, Security and Privacy, and General. Selecting Use Apple Watch to unlock apps and your Mac is what enables that feature. Next, and that is something really weird with macOS, is to turn on the firewall. I still have no idea why by default macOS comes with the firewall disabled. The firewall is basically a network filter that allows it to control which programs and services can accept incoming connections, so I take it very seriously and keep it on. The next thing I do is what usually starts to drive me crazy around this time of the setup, and that is to turn on tapping on the trackpad. I know some people prefer to use the physical click, but I find tapping to be much faster and more efficient. Plus, pressing on the trackpad is simulated anyway, so even if you don't turn on tapping, you're still tapping, just forcefully. While on the topic of mouse control, since I do use a Magic Mouse on many occasions, I enable secondary click while in settings. To feel more at home, I like to add my Memoji as my profile picture. Since it's animated, it takes unlocking experience to a whole other level, and it's a lot more fun. I used to use an Alfred as a Spotlight replacement, but I'm now back to the OEM Spotlight, which is still my preferred way to quickly launch things that are not in the dock. I prefer a different shortcut combo to summon Spotlight though, and that is Option plus Spacebar, so I customize that shortcut. I like to use the hot corners feature too, so by going to Desktop and Screensaver, I choose to have the top left corner triggering the Launchpad and the bottom left starting the screensaver. Launching the screensaver is a great way to walk away from the computer and quickly lock it. Bottom right is now reserved for quick notes, which I might use occasionally. Under the battery pane, I'd like to make sure that optimized battery charging is enabled, since this helps preserve the battery life. Under accessibility and zoom, I always turn on scroll gesture with control to zoom in and out of the operating system. No matter what screen you work on, this is a great feature to use non-stop that not only helps you avoid trying to focus on something tiny, but it is also a great way when you want to share something with someone from a distance. Finally, in the settings panel, I go to displays and turn off True Tone. As much as I like how the display shifts colors to match my environment, this might ruin a design that I'm working on or a color corrections that I'm trying to apply to a video. Next, before I do anything else, I dump all my files from the external drive that I used to offload things from the old Mac. To me, that is almost always just the files from my downloads folder, and I'll explain why in a minute. In the case of this new 16-inch MacBook Pro, I can finally move all my video projects from my other external drives too, since I have 2 terabytes to play with. The final thing that I do is to transfer over my fonts. That is a surprisingly easy process, by the way. On the old Mac, I open the font book and I select all my fonts. Then I just choose export and airdrop those fonts to the new Mac, where I just import them. By the way, if you end up enjoying this video, subscribe, because why not? The reason I just move over my downloads folder is because for everything else I use iCloud. My personal files, documents, pictures, including everything work-related is on iCloud. As I first log into the new Mac and as I sign in, iCloud begins syncing all my files and folders, and it usually does that the first 24 hours. I have a lot of things on iCloud, but rest assured, it knows what to download based on my past behavior and needs. I have a dedicated video on how I use iCloud, so I'll make sure to list it below if you're interested. From the iCloud settings, I also turn on synchronization for my desktop and documents folder, since I use them a lot, especially the desktop folder. I'm really used to have access to my desktop things because I often refer to them from either my iPad or the iPhone. Enabling iMessage on iCloud is also a vital step in the process, after which I end all sync steps with setting up my network storage device, or NAS. I use a Synology NAS and I have to install the Drive app for it in order to start backing up my video files. I also use Backblaze to back up my Mac as a means of restoring files should I happen to delete or replace something by accident. Next up is the dock, or it might be somewhere in between all those steps. Step number 1 for the dock is to get rid of all the default apps that I won't be using. I prefer to keep my dock on the left side, so I move it there. From the dock settings under System Preferences, I prefer to turn off the recent application suggestions because I am aware as to what I want to use at all times. Because of nostalgia feelings, I recently turned on magnification too. One final thing about the dock, I prefer to have the apps minimized within their app icon instead of shrinking to the side and expanding the dock. Moving to the desktop, I turn on Stacks, which automatically organizes all type of files into their own kind. If you have a messy desktop, try turning on Stacks and enjoy the magical result of immediate declutter. When it comes to the icons on the desktop, I prefer to have them displayed with the label position on the right, sorted by kind and date. Now let's talk about the Finder. From the sidebar, I turn off the recents folder and the tags because I don't use them. I don't actually use the pictures and music either. While in the Finder settings, I also choose my default Finder folder to be the downloads folder and not recents. I also customize the Finder view to be a list with preview enabled on the right. I also enable show path bar and show status bar. To put the cherry on top, I like to add shortcuts to my most used projects folders in the form of icons on top of the Finder window. To do that, I hold Option plus Command and drag the folders over. To fix my biggest annoyance, I select few music files and change the default media player for audio files to be QuickTime and not Apple Music. Since I often download music for my projects and I deal with audio files, I don't want to mess up my music organization by opening 10 audio files or even voiceovers by accident. Next up is Safari. The first thing that I do is to stop Safari from automatically opening my downloads. I also enable the developer mode because I use that a lot. If you're an Apple One subscriber, you might also use the private relay feature that Apple offers, which is still in beta, by the way. In case you're not aware what it is, Apple explains it best. When private relay is enabled, your requests are sent through 2 separate secure internet relays. Your IP address is visible to your network provider and to the first relay, which is operated by Apple. Your DNS records are encrypted, so neither party can see the address of the website you're trying to visit. Keep in mind though that if this feature is enabled, you might witness some slowdowns when browsing on Safari. Before I move to installing apps, I open the Launchpad and clean and organize all default apps that I don't particularly care about. In many occasions, I prefer to keep the Launchpad only one page, so in this step, I keep very few apps and the rest I ditch into a miscellaneous folder. Okay, so apps. I'll skip the trivial Microsoft Office and Google Chrome apps because you know exactly what they do. I use Google Chrome mainly because of YouTube, but for everything else I prefer to use Safari. The first fun app is called Short Menu. It lives in the menu bar and it helps me create short links very quickly. Another app worth checking out is called SideNotes. As the name implies, the app lives hidden on the side of the screen and can be summoned at any point and used to dump all sorts of information that comes to mind throughout the day. From images to snippets of codes, SideNotes can take it all and keep it organized. You can even export your notes as beautiful images to share on social media. This is my new favorite way to quickly write down my daily tasks as they come to mind as well. Also, I haven't seen a quicker way to grab notes or text from another place like in SideNotes, and believe me, it is really quick, like an inbox for your thoughts. What makes this tool unique is that it blends the simple sticky notes of the past with the more complex note-taking apps of today and makes them available only when needed. You can get a 30-day trial for free, and by using this code, you can get 10% off when you decide to buy the app. The code is valid until April 2022. Next up, CleanMyMacX is my choice of a cleanup and maintenance tool. I use it to regularly scan my Mac and delete all sorts of junk and cache things that clutter my storage and memory, and also I use it to monitor my overall computer storage. With the built-in tool, I can take a glimpse of what takes up most of my storage and quickly clean it up. CleanMyMacX is also great for uninstalling apps the proper way without leaving a trace of any sort. I use 1Password as a supplement password manager to the built-in and already synchronized keychain. 1Password is also great if you work on more than one platform like Windows and Mac. Right now I'm enjoying a very quirky screensaver called Gridlock, which I'll make sure to list below. Not very savory if you ask me, but it looks awesome on the mini LED display of the laptop. I use a little app called Amphetamine, which by the way is absolutely free. This app helps me create sessions that keep my Mac awake without allowing it to fall asleep while in the middle of a shoot, for example. There's other cool perks to this app, by the way, but we don't have time today. I use Image2Icon to create my own Finder icons like the ones that you saw earlier in the Finder toolbar. And PhotoBulk is a great app to manipulate a bunch of images and resize and optimize them, for example. Rectangle helps me snap my windows the way I want to, something that Microsoft Windows has built in. Rectangle was a recommendation from a viewer last time, so if you have other recommendations, feel free to list them in the comment section below. I appreciate it. Recently, I got hooked up to the app called Pocket Casts, and I had to pay a subscription to have it, enabled on the Mac, but I do find it to be one of the better podcast apps out there. Monitor control is definitely a utility app that I'd like to point out in this video. Through it, you can control the volume and brightness of external monitors, which is definitely worthwhile. It is also free, so go check it out. So by this time, things are starting to look messy in the menu bar, and in order not to crash the notch, I'm installing Bartender as the app that hides all the apps from the menu. It is a very clean and clever tool that can also be customized. The email client that I've been using ever since it was launched like 2 years ago is Hey. It is not just an email client, but rather a fully fledged email service developed by the awesome people over at Basecamp. It's an app worth separate video if you ask me. Something new to me recently is an app called Downie, which is basically a YouTube download app. It is paid and it is capable of downloading YouTube content in its full 4K potential, but keep in mind that in order to take full advantage of it, you'll have to get the supporting converter tool called Permute. Now let's talk about some power apps. Those are the tools that I use to put food on the table. First off, it is all Affinity Photo, Affinity Designer, occasionally Publisher. The Affinity software has taken the creators world by storm the last few years, and it is a great pay-once Adobe alternative to Photoshop and Illustrator. I use only one Adobe app, and that is Lightroom, and I'm still hoping that Affinity will soon release an alternative to it as well. I edit all videos on Final Cut Pro, and alongside it, I use the Compressor app, which is used to batch working on exports, and MotionVFX, which are the plugins for Final Cut. I like to create stacking photos every once in a while, and the app that I love to use is called HeliconFocus. Once I insert all the photos that I want to stack, the process is always very satisfying. For scripts and business management, I use Notion. And in fact, I have a separate video on it. You can check it out on my channel if you're interested in how I use it. In terms of smart things like HomeKit and stuff, I'd recommend an app called Home Control. It is what I use to integrate it with the Elgato Stream Deck in order to control the studio from it. It has a lot to it besides being just a quick way to trigger automations. Of course, the Elgato products are installed too, one to control the Stream Deck and the other to control my key light. If you want more details on how I use iCloud to store my digital life, check out this video. My Mac OS Monterey features video might also be of interest to you, so I'll leave it here as well. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. This is E, over and out.